When 58-year-old Diana Williams decided to book a room at her own five-star hotel under a false name, she expected to see how her staff treated ordinary guests. What she discovered instead was so shocking that it led to the biggest staff overhaul in the hotel's history and exposed a culture of discrimination she never knew existed. Before we start this incredible story, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and at the end, don't forget to rate our story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. Diana Williams sat in her corner office on the 47th floor of the Grandview Tower, looking down at the bustling streets of downtown Atlanta. From her window, she could see the elegant entrance of the Meridian Grand Hotel, the crown jewel of her hospitality empire and the first hotel she had ever owned. At 58, Diana had built Williams Hospitality Group into a $200 million company with 12 luxury hotels across the Southeast. But lately, she had been hearing whispers, complaints from guests, concerns from business associates, and troubling rumors about the service quality at her flagship property. The problem was, whenever Diana visited the Meridian Grand, she was treated like royalty. The staff knew who she was, and everything ran perfectly during her inspections. She needed to see how the hotel operated when no one knew the owner was watching. That's when she had an idea that would change everything. Diana picked up her personal cell phone and dialed the Meridian Grand's reservation line. Meridian Grand Hotel, this is Stephanie speaking. How may I assist you today? Diana recognized the voice. Stephanie Rodriguez, the head of reservations, whom Diana had personally hired 3 years ago. Hello, Diana said, altering her voice slightly to sound more tentative and less authoritative. I'd like to make a reservation for this weekend. Of course, let me help you with that. What dates were you looking for? This Friday and Saturday night, just one guest. Perfect, and may I have your name for the reservation? Diana paused. She needed a name that wouldn't raise any flags. Diana Johnson. Diana Johnson. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. What type of room would you prefer? Just a standard room, please. Nothing fancy. Stephanie's tone remained professional, but became noticeably less enthusiastic. Of course. Our standard rooms are $289 per night. Would you like me to reserve one of those for you? Yes, that would be fine. As Stephanie gathered Diana's fake information, a secondary phone number, a different email address, and a story about being in town for a family reunion, Diana noticed something subtle but telling. The energy in Stephanie's voice had dropped significantly when she requested a standard room rather than a suite. Ms. Johnson, I do need to mention that we require a credit card to hold the reservation, and there's a $50 incidental hold per night. That's fine. Also, just so you're aware, our standard rooms don't include breakfast, and our restaurant requires reservations for dinner service. Diana frowned. These policies were news to her. In fact, she was certain that standard rooms were supposed to include continental breakfast as part of the package. I thought breakfast was included in all rooms. Oh no, ma'am. Complimentary breakfast is only for our suite guests and loyalty program members. This was definitely not the policy Diana had established. She made a mental note to investigate further. After completing the reservation, Diana hung up, feeling both excited and concerned. The excitement came from the prospect of finally seeing how her hotel operated behind the scenes. The concern came from the subtle policy changes she was already discovering. Over the next 3 days, Diana carefully planned her undercover visit. She went shopping at thrift stores, buying modest clothes that would make her look like someone who might struggle to afford a luxury hotel. She practiced walking differently, speaking more softly, and carrying herself without the confidence that came from owning a multi-million-dollar business. Diana also did something she had never done before. She researched online reviews of her own hotel, specifically looking for comments from black guests. What she found made her stomach turn. Review after review mentioned subtle discrimination. Black guests being given rooms near the elevator or ice machine, longer wait times for service, assumptions about their ability to afford certain amenities, and staff who seemed surprised when black guests could actually pay their bills. One review particularly stood out: beautiful hotel, but the staff made it clear that they didn't think I belonged there. I was asked 3 times if I was sure I could afford the room rate, and when I paid with a Black American Express card, the front desk clerk actually called to verify it was real. I've stayed at hotels around the world, and I've never been treated with such suspicion. Diana felt sick. These reviews were from the past 6 months, meaning this discrimination was happening right now, under her watch, in a hotel that was supposed to represent excellence and hospitality. By Thursday evening, Diana had transformed herself completely. She looked in the mirror and saw a middle-aged black woman in a simple dress, carrying an old purse, who looked like she might be visiting Atlanta for the first time. But she also felt something else: nervousness about what she might discover about the business she had spent 15 years building. Friday morning, Diana took a taxi to the Meridian Grand instead of her usual chauffeur-driven Mercedes. As the taxi pulled up to the elegant entrance, Diana took a deep breath and prepared to see her own hotel through completely different eyes. The doorman, Marcus Thompson, was someone Diana knew well. She had personally approved his promotion to head doorman 2 years ago because of his warm personality and impeccable service. But as Diana stepped out of the taxi with her modest luggage, Marcus barely glanced at her. No offer to help with bags, no warm welcome, no eye contact. He was too busy chatting with a well-dressed white couple who had arrived in a Bentley. Diana stood for a moment, testing whether Marcus would offer assistance. When he didn't, she picked up her own bags and walked into the lobby she had designed herself. The Meridian Grand's lobby was spectacular. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers, and elegant seating areas. Diana had spent months working with designers to create a space that felt both luxurious and welcoming. But as she approached the front desk, Diana began to see her beautiful lobby differently. She noticed that most of the black guests were standing, while white guests were seated in the comfortable chairs. She observed that the concierge seemed to be primarily helping lighter-skinned guests, while darker-skinned guests waited. These observations hit Diana like physical blows. Was this really happening in her hotel? The front desk had 3 clerks working: Jennifer Walsh, a young white woman Diana had hired straight from hotel management school; Carlos Rivera, a Latino man who had been with the hotel for 4 years; and Ashley Chen, an Asian American woman who was one of their most experienced front desk staff. Diana approached Jennifer's station. "Good afternoon," Diana said quietly. "I have a reservation under Johnson." Jennifer looked up from her computer with a polite but noticeably cooler expression than Diana was used to seeing from her staff. "First name?" "Diana." Jennifer typed for a moment, then paused. "I'm showing a reservation for Diana Johnson, but I need to verify some information." "What do you need to verify?" "Well, the reservation shows a standard room for 2 nights. That's going to be $578 total plus tax and fees. The total comes to $681.74. Diana had expected this amount, but she noticed something in Jennifer's tone, a subtle emphasis on the total cost, as if she were testing whether Diana could actually afford it. "That's fine. And how will you be paying today?" Diana handed over a credit card, not her usual Black American Express, but a regular Visa card in the name Diana Johnson that she had obtained for this specific purpose. Jennifer took the card and studied it carefully, then looked at Diana again. "I'll need to see a photo ID as well." Diana provided a driver's license that matched the credit card. She had gone to considerable effort to obtain these legitimate documents under her legal middle name and maiden name combination. Jennifer processed the card, but Diana noticed she took longer than usual. Through her peripheral vision, Diana could see Jennifer examining the card more carefully than she typically did for other guests. "The card is being declined," Jennifer said after several minutes. Diana felt her heart skip. "That's impossible. There's no issue with that card. Let me try running it again." This time, Jennifer ran the card more aggressively, and Diana could see her exchanging glances with Carlos at the next station. They were clearly discussing whether Diana could actually afford the room. "It went through this time," Jennifer said, though her tone suggested she was surprised. "Could I get my room key, please?" "Of course. But first, I need to go over some hotel policies with you." Jennifer launched into a speech about hotel rules that Diana had never heard given to other guests. No noise after 10 p.m., no visitors without registering at the front desk, no use of pool facilities without proper swim attire, and a warning that any damage to the room would result in additional charges. "Also," Jennifer continued, "breakfast is not included with your room rate. Our restaurant requires reservations, and we do ask that guests dress appropriately for all public areas." The implication was clear. Jennifer was assuming that Diana might not know how to behave in a luxury hotel. "Thank you," Diana said quietly, taking her key card. "Your room is 1247. The elevators are to your right. No offer to help with luggage, no welcome to the hotel, no information about amenities or services. Just the bare minimum to get Diana out of the lobby as quickly as possible." As Diana walked toward the elevators, she passed a white couple checking in at Carlos's station. She heard him say, "Welcome to the Meridian Grand. We're so excited to have you staying with us. Let me tell you about some of our wonderful amenities." The difference in treatment was unmistakable. Diana rode the elevator to the 12th floor, her mind racing with everything she had observed in just the first 10 minutes of her stay. But she knew the real test was just beginning. She had built the Meridian Grand to be a place where every guest felt valued and welcome. Instead, she was discovering that her own hotel was systematically discriminating against guests who looked like her. As Diana opened the door to room 1247, she made a decision. She wouldn't just observe the discrimination, she would document it. And then she would do something about it that would shock everyone who thought they knew Diana Williams. Room 1247 was located at the end of a long hallway next to the ice machine and directly across from the housekeeping supply closet. Diana immediately recognized this as one of the least desirable room locations in the hotel, the kind of room usually given to guests who booked through discount websites or complained about pricing. As Diana opened the door, she was struck by how different the room felt from this perspective. While it was clean and technically up to the hotel's standards, it was clearly one of the rooms that hadn't been updated in the most recent renovation. The carpet was older, the furniture was more worn, and the view was of the hotel's service alley rather than the city skyline. Diana had stayed in this hotel dozens of times, but always in the penthouse suite, or at minimum a luxury room with city views. She had never realized that her standard rooms were quite this standard. She set down her luggage and immediately called the front desk to test the service. "Front desk, this is Jennifer." "Hi, this is Diana Johnson in room 1247. I was wondering if I could get some extra towels. I can send housekeeping up, but it might be a while. We're pretty busy today. How long might it be?" "Maybe an hour or so." Diana knew for a fact that when VIP guests requested extra towels, they arrived within 10 minutes. She decided to test something else. "Also, I was hoping to make a dinner reservation for tonight. What times do you have available? What restaurant are you looking for?" "The main hotel restaurant." Diana was referring to Azure, the hotel's award-winning fine dining establishment that she had personally recruited a James Beard Award winner to run. "Azure is fully booked tonight, but I can get you a reservation at the sports bar downstairs, or there are several chain restaurants within walking distance." This was interesting. Diana happened to know that Azure always held back a few tables for walk-ins and last-minute VIP requests. But apparently those tables weren't available for guests like Diana Johnson. What about tomorrow night? Let me check. I have 5:30 or 9:45 available. Both of these were the least desirable dining times. Too early for most business dinners, too late for most families. The prime 7 down to 8:30 slots were apparently reserved for other guests. I'll take the 5:30 reservation. Great. And just so you know, Azure does have a dress code. Business casual at minimum. Again, the implication was that Diana might not know how to dress appropriately for a nice restaurant. After hanging up, Diana sat on the bed and made notes on her phone about everything she had experienced so far. Then, she decided to test the hotel's other services. She went down to the concierge desk, where Maria Santos was working. Maria was an employee Diana had specifically praised in the past for her knowledge of Atlanta and her ability to arrange everything from theater tickets to private tours. "Excuse me," Diana said, approaching the concierge desk. "I was hoping you could help me with some recommendations for tomorrow." Maria looked up with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course. What kind of activities are you interested in?" "I'd love to see some of the historic sites in Atlanta. Maybe the Martin Luther King Jr. Historic District." "Oh." Maria's expression shifted slightly. "Well, that's not really in the best part of town. Are you sure you want to go there?" Diana was stunned. The MLK Historic District was one of Atlanta's most important tourist destinations, and the hotel regularly arranged tours there for guests. "Yes, I'm very interested in visiting." "Well, I suppose I could give you directions for taking public transportation. It's probably the most economical way to get there." Maria was assuming that Diana couldn't afford a taxi or rideshare, despite the fact that she was staying at a $300 per night hotel. "What about other historic sites?" "You might enjoy the Atlanta History Center. It's in a much nicer area. Although..." Maria paused. "The admission is $24 per person." Again, the subtle implication that cost might be an issue. "I was also hoping to do some shopping. There's a Walmart about 15 minutes away. Or if you're looking for something closer, there's a CVS pharmacy in the lobby level." Diana couldn't believe what she was hearing. When white guests asked about shopping, Maria typically recommended Lenox Square, Phipps Plaza, or the upscale boutiques in Buckhead. But for Diana Johnson, she was suggesting Walmart. "Thank you," Diana said quietly, walking away from the concierge desk, feeling like she had been gut-punched. She decided to test one more service, the hotel spa. The Meridian Grand Spa was something Diana was particularly proud of. She had invested heavily in creating a world-class facility with top-tier treatments and therapists. At the spa reception desk, a young woman named Brittany was working alone. "Hi. I'd like to book a massage for this afternoon if possible." Brittany consulted her computer. "I have availability, but our standard massage is $180 for 60 minutes. Diana noticed that Brittany emphasized the price much more than spa staff usually did. "That's fine. And there's a $25 facility fee for use of the relaxation room and amenities." This was news to Diana. She was pretty sure there was no facility fee, especially not one that was mentioned so prominently to discourage usage. "Okay. Also, I should mention that we require a credit card on file, and gratuity isn't included." Brittany was listing every possible cost associated with the spa treatment, clearly testing whether Diana could afford the full experience. "I understand. What time is available?" "I have 3 p.m. with Marcus, our male therapist." Diana knew that the spa had 3 female therapists and 1 male therapist, and that most female guests preferred female therapists. Offering her the male therapist as the only option seemed designed to make her decline. Do you have any female therapists available? Well, I have Sarah available at 6 p.m., but she's one of our premium therapists, so her rate is $220. Again, an assumption that Diana couldn't afford the higher rate. I'll take the 3 hours appointment with Marcus. As Diana made her way back to her room, she felt emotionally exhausted. In just 3 hours at her own hotel, she had experienced more subtle discrimination than she had encountered in years of traveling as a successful businesswoman. But what hurt most wasn't the personal slight. It was the realization that this was probably happening to other guests every day. Black visitors to Atlanta were coming to her hotel and being treated as second-class customers, and she had been completely unaware of it. Diana sat in her substandard room, looking out at the service alley, and made a decision. She wouldn't just document this discrimination. She would create a situation that would force her staff to reveal their true attitudes in a way that couldn't be denied or explained away. She picked up her phone and called her assistant, Rebecca, from her personal number. "Rebecca, it's Diana. I need you to do something unusual for me, and I need you to not ask any questions." "Of course. What do you need?" "I want you to call the Meridian Grand tomorrow morning and complain about a guest in room 1247. Tell them that this guest was loud, inappropriate, and made other guests uncomfortable in the lobby." "Diana, what are you talking about? What guest?" "Just trust me on this. Make the complaint and then record whatever response you get from the staff." "Are you sure about this?" Diana looked around her disappointing room, thinking about all the other black guests who had been given similar experiences. "I'm absolutely sure. It's time to find out what my staff really thinks about guests who look like me." Tomorrow would bring the real test of her hotel's character, and Diana was prepared to learn some very uncomfortable truths about the business she had spent 15 years building. The next morning, Diana woke up in her uncomfortable room, feeling more determined than ever to see this experiment through to its conclusion. She had barely slept, partly because of the old mattress, but mostly because her mind was racing with everything she had observed. At 9 a.m., she went down to the hotel's breakfast cafe. Not the elegant restaurant where complimentary breakfast was supposedly reserved for sweet guests, but the small coffee shop in the lobby that served pastries and coffee to anyone willing to pay. The barista, a young white man named Tyler, greeted the guest ahead of Diana with enthusiasm. "Good morning. What can I get started for you today? Have you tried our signature breakfast blend?" When Diana approached the counter, Tyler's demeanor shifted noticeably. No warm greeting, no eye contact, just a flat "Next. I'd like a coffee and a croissant, please." "What size coffee?" "Medium, please." Tyler prepared her order without any of the friendly chat he had offered the previous customer. When he handed her the coffee, he didn't offer cream or sugar, didn't mention that refills were free, and didn't thank her for her business. Diana took her coffee to a small table near the lobby and waited. At exactly 10:15 a.m., her phone rang. "Diana, I made the call like you asked," Rebecca said, "and, well, you're not going to like what happened." "Tell me everything." "I called and spoke to someone named Jennifer at the front desk. I told her I was a guest who had been disturbed by the behavior of someone in room 1247. I said this guest had been loud in the lobby and had made me and other guests uncomfortable." "And how did she respond?" "She immediately said, 'Oh, we've been expecting this call.' Diana, she said they had been expecting complaints about you." Diana felt her blood run cold. "What else did she say?" "She said, and I'm quoting directly, 'We could tell from the moment she checked in that she wasn't our usual type of guest. We've been keeping an eye on the situation.' Rebecca, please tell me you recorded this." "I recorded everything. Diana, there's more. She asked me what specific behaviors I had witnessed, and when I kept my complaint vague, she started suggesting things." "What kind of things?" "She asked if you had been using inappropriate language, if you had seemed intoxicated, if you had been bothering other guests for money. She was leading me towards specific accusations. Diana closed her eyes, feeling sick. Her own employee was not only willing to believe the worst about a black guest, but was actively trying to build a case for removing that guest from the hotel. What did you tell her? I played along to see how far she would go. I said you had been acting inappropriately, without giving specifics. She immediately said they would handle the situation and that the guest would be dealt with by the end of the day. Dealt with. Her words, not mine. Diana, I think they're planning to ask you to leave. Diana hung up the phone and sat in the lobby of her own hotel, watching her staff interact with other guests. Now that she knew what to look for, the patterns were undeniable. Black guests waited longer for service. They were offered less information about amenities. They were steered toward cheaper options and away from premium services. And apparently, when someone complained about a black guest, the staff was all too ready to believe the worst and take action. Diana decided to test one more thing before the inevitable confrontation. She went to the hotel's business center, which offered computer and printing services for guests. The business center was staffed by Kevin Park, a young Asian-American man who had been with the hotel for about a year. Diana had always been impressed with Kevin's technical skills and his customer service during her previous interactions with him as the hotel owner. "Excuse me," Diana said, approaching the desk. "I need to print out some documents." Kevin looked up with a neutral expression. "That'll be 50 cents per page for black and white, $1 per page for color." "That's fine. I just need to print about 10 pages. I'll need to see a room key to verify you're a guest." This was interesting. Diana had never heard of guests being required to show room keys to use the business center. "Of course." Diana handed over her key card. Kevin scanned it and frowned. This isn't working. Let me try again." He scanned it several more times, making a show of the process. "I'm sorry, but our system isn't recognizing your room." "Are you sure you're registered as a guest here?" Diana felt her temper rising. "I checked in yesterday, room 1247. Let me call the front desk to verify." Kevin picked up the phone and had a quick, whispered conversation. When he hung up, his attitude had shifted completely. "I'm sorry, but I can't provide business center services to you right now. There seems to be some kind of issue with your guest status." "What kind of issue?" "I'd recommend speaking with the front desk. They can probably clear this up." Diana knew exactly what was happening. Word had already spread through the staff that she was a problem guest who should be monitored and potentially removed. She went back to her room and called Rebecca again. "I need you to make another call. This time, I want you to call as a potential guest and ask about booking a room for next weekend." "Diana, what are you trying to prove?" "Just make the call. Ask about room availability, rates, and amenities. But this time, speak in the way that suggests that you're like me." Rebecca understood immediately. "You want me to sound black on the phone. I want to see if they treat phone reservations differently based on how someone sounds." 20 minutes later, Rebecca called back with results that made Diana even angrier. "I called and spoke to Stephanie in reservations. When I used what white people think is a black voice, the whole conversation changed." "How so?" "First, she quoted me rates that were $50 higher than the rates currently advertised on the website. When I asked about amenities, she emphasized all the extra costs: parking fees, resort fees, charges for internet access. But those services are complimentary for all guests." Exactly. She was either lying about the costs or trying to discourage me from booking. And when I asked about the restaurant, she said it was very expensive and suggested I might be more comfortable eating elsewhere. Diana had heard enough. Her hotel wasn't just providing subpar service to black guests. It was actively trying to prevent black guests from staying there at all. At 2:00 p.m., Diana received a call in her room. "Ms. Johnson, this is Michael Harris, the hotel manager. I need to speak with you about some concerns that have been brought to our attention." Diana recognized Michael's voice. She had hired him 2 years ago to be the general manager of the Meridian Grand. He was someone she had trusted to maintain the hotel's standards and values. "What concerns?" "We've received reports about inappropriate behavior, and I'd like to meet with you to discuss the situation." "What inappropriate behavior?" "I'd prefer to discuss this in person. Could you come down to my office?" Diana looked at herself in the mirror. She was still dressed as Diana Johnson, modest clothes, simple appearance, the kind of guest that her staff apparently felt comfortable discriminating against. "I'll be right down." As Diana rode the elevator to the manager's office, she realized that this was the moment she had been building toward. In a few minutes, she would discover exactly what her trusted general manager really thought about black guests, and exactly how far he was willing to go to remove someone he considered undesirable. The elevator doors opened, and Diana walked toward a confrontation that would expose the ugly truth about the hotel she had built with her own vision and values. She was about to learn whether the discrimination she had experienced was the result of a few bad employees, or whether it reflected a systemic culture that had infected her entire organization. Either way, by the end of the day, Michael Harris and the rest of her staff would discover that they had made the biggest mistake of their careers. Michael Harris's office was on the mezzanine level, accessible through a discreet hallway behind the main lobby. Diana had spent countless hours in this office during the hotel's construction and early operations, but today she was entering it as an unwelcome guest rather than the owner. Michael's assistant Patricia looked up as Diana approached. "Ms. Johnson, Mr. Harris is expecting you. You can go right in." Diana knocked and entered the office where she had made dozens of important decisions about the hotel's future. Michael stood up from behind his desk, but his body language was formal and unwelcoming, a stark contrast to the warm, enthusiastic greeting she was accustomed to receiving from him. "Ms. Johnson, please have a seat." Diana sat in one of the chairs facing Michael's desk, noting that he remained standing in a position of authority rather than taking the more collaborative approach he usually used with her. "I wanted to speak with you about some concerns we've received regarding your stay with us." "What specific concerns?" Michael pulled out a file folder and opened it. "We've had multiple reports about disruptive behavior in our public areas." "Multiple reports? I've barely interacted with anyone. According to our staff, you've been acting in ways that have made other guests uncomfortable." Diana felt her anger rising, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Could you be more specific about what I allegedly did?" Michael consulted his notes. "There are reports that you were loud and argumentative at the front desk during check-in." "I wasn't argumentative at all. I simply questioned why my credit card was being examined so carefully. There are also reports that you were loitering in the lobby in a way that made other guests uncomfortable." "Loitering? I was sitting in the lobby having coffee, just like any other guest." Michael's expression showed that he didn't believe her explanations. "Ms. Johnson, I'm going to be direct with you. This is a luxury hotel with certain standards and expectations. Our guests expect a particular level of atmosphere." Diana felt the words like a physical blow. "What kind of atmosphere?" "An atmosphere where everyone feels comfortable and safe." "And you're saying that my presence makes people feel unsafe?" Michael shifted uncomfortably. "I'm saying that we've received complaints and we have to take those complaints seriously." "From how many guests?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the specifics of our guest complaints." Diana suspected that the only complaint had been the fake one from Rebecca, but Michael was treating it as if there had been multiple incidents. What exactly are you asking me to do? Michael leaned forward. I'm asking you to be more mindful of how your behavior affects other guests. And I'm putting you on notice that any further complaints will result in us asking you to leave the hotel. Even though I've done nothing wrong? Miss Johnson, let's be honest here. You booked a standard room at a luxury hotel, you've been questioning our policies and procedures, and you've been making our staff uncomfortable with your attitude. My attitude. Your confrontational attitude. Your assumption that you're entitled to the same level of service as our premium guests. Diana couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her own general manager was telling her that she wasn't entitled to good service because she had booked a standard room and dared to question discriminatory treatment. I see. And what level of service should I expect? You should expect the level of service appropriate for the room rate you're paying and your status as a guest. My status. Michael was clearly uncomfortable with the conversation, but he pressed on. Ms. Johnson, I've been in the hospitality industry for 15 years. I can tell when someone isn't accustomed to staying at properties like this. And what makes you think I'm not accustomed to luxury hotels? Well, Michael gestured vaguely at Diana's appearance. It's just obvious that this isn't your usual environment. Diana realized that Michael was making assumptions about her background, her education, her social class, and her right to be in his hotel based entirely on her race and her modest appearance. So what happens now? Now you finish out your stay without causing any more disruptions, and in the future you might be more comfortable at properties that are more suited to your needs. Properties that are more suited to my needs? There are several very nice hotels in Atlanta that cater to different types of travelers. Diana understood exactly what Michael was saying. He was suggesting that she should stay at hotels that served primarily black clientele rather than continuing to patronize establishments like the Meridian Grand. I see. And if I choose to book another stay here in the future? Michael's expression hardened. I would strongly recommend that you consider other options. Diana stood up slowly. Michael, can I ask you something? What? Do you know who owns this hotel? Michael looked confused by the question. It's owned by Williams Hospitality Group. And do you know who owns Williams Hospitality Group? Some wealthy investor. I've never met the actual owner. All my communications go through the corporate office. Diana smiled for the first time since the conversation began. That's interesting. Because I have some communications to share with you. She pulled out her phone and played the recording Rebecca had made of her conversation with Jennifer at the front desk. Michael's face went pale as he heard his front desk clerk saying, "We could tell from the moment she checked in that she wasn't our usual type of guest." Where did you get this recording? That's not important. What's important is that it proves your staff was already biased against me before any alleged complaints were made. Diana played the second recording, where Stephanie in reservations had quoted inflated rates and tried to discourage a black caller from booking a room. Michael was no longer standing. He had sunk into his chair, clearly realizing that he was in serious trouble. Miss Johnson, I can explain. Actually, Michael, let me explain something to you. Diana reached into her purse and pulled out her real driver's license, her corporate credit cards, and her business cards. My name is Diana Williams. I am the owner of Williams Hospitality Group. I am the owner of this hotel. And you just told the person who signs your paycheck that she should stay at properties more suited to her needs. Michael stared at the identification documents, his face cycling through disbelief, horror, and panic. Miss Williams, I had no idea. Of course you had no idea, because you and your staff have been so busy assuming that a black woman couldn't possibly own a luxury hotel that you never bothered to treat me with basic human decency. Diana stood up and walked to the window overlooking the lobby where she had been discriminated against for the past 2 days. Michael, in the past 48 hours, I have experienced more racism at my own hotel than I have encountered in years of traveling as a successful businesswoman. And the worst part is that you and your staff felt completely comfortable expressing your prejudices because you assumed there would be no consequences. Michael was trying to speak, but Diana cut him off. I want you to call an emergency meeting of all department heads. We're going to have a conversation about what's been happening at this hotel, and we're going to make some immediate changes. Ms. Williams, please, let me explain. Michael, the time for explanations is over. The time for accountability has begun. Diana walked toward the door, then turned back. Oh, and Michael, when you're calling that meeting, you might want to start updating your resume, because after today your career at this hotel is over. As Diana left Michael's office, she felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and determination. The experiment had revealed exactly what she had feared, that her hotel had become a place where discrimination was not only tolerated, but actively practiced. But now it was time for the real work to begin. Diana Williams, successful businesswoman and hotel owner, was about to show her staff what happened when they underestimated a black woman who had built an empire through intelligence, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept anything less than excellence. The reckoning was about to begin. Within 2 hours, every department head at the Meridian Grand had been summoned to the hotel's private conference room. The message had gone out that the owner of Williams Hospitality Group would be conducting an emergency meeting, but most of the staff assumed it would be a routine corporate visit. Jennifer Walsh, Carlos Rivera, and Ashley Chen from the front desk sat nervously at the conference table. Stephanie Rodriguez from reservations kept checking her phone anxiously. Maria Santos from the concierge desk looked confused about why she had been called. Kevin Park from the business center sat quietly in the corner. Michael Harris stood at the front of the room, sweating despite the air conditioning. He had spent the past hour trying to figure out how to explain the situation to his staff without admitting that he had personally insulted the hotel owner. At exactly 4 p.m., the conference room door opened. Diana Williams walked in, but she was no longer Diana Johnson. She had changed into an impeccable business suit, styled her hair professionally, and carried herself with the unmistakable confidence of someone who owned everything in sight. The reaction in the room was immediate and dramatic. Jennifer gasped audibly. Stephanie's mouth fell open. Maria dropped her pen. Several staff members looked around in confusion, clearly trying to figure out who this woman was and why she looked familiar. Diana took her place at the head of the conference table and set down a folder containing printed copies of all the recordings, along with detailed notes from her 48-hour undercover stay. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't recognize me, my name is Diana Williams. I am the owner and CEO of Williams Hospitality Group, which means I own this hotel. The silence in the room was deafening. However, most of you know me by a different name. For the past 2 days, I've been staying at this hotel as Diana Johnson, a guest in room 1247. Jennifer's face went completely white. Stephanie looked like she might faint. Michael stared at the floor, unable to make eye contact with anyone. I came here because I had been hearing concerning reports about the quality of service at our flagship property. What I discovered was far worse than anything I had imagined. Diana opened her folder and pulled out her first set of notes. Let's start with you, Jennifer. When I checked in on Friday, you ran my credit card multiple times, examined it carefully, and then proceeded to lecture me about hotel policies that you don't typically explain to other guests. Can you tell me why you treated me differently? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. I don't know what you mean. Really? Because I have recordings of conversations that suggest you and your colleagues had very specific assumptions about guests who look like me. Diana pressed play on her phone, and Rebecca's recorded conversation with Jennifer filled the room. We could tell from the moment she checked in that she wasn't our usual type of guest. We've been keeping an eye on the situation. Jennifer started crying. Ms. Williams, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean... What exactly didn't you mean, Jennifer? You didn't mean to profile a guest based on her race. You didn't mean to treat a paying customer as suspicious because she was black. Or you didn't mean to get caught. Diana turned to Stephanie. And you, Stephanie. When a caller who sounded black tried to make a reservation, you quoted rates $50 higher than our advertised prices and tried to discourage her from staying here. Can you explain that? Stephanie was shaking. There must be some misunderstanding. Diana played the second recording, where Stephanie had discriminated against the caller she thought was black. There's no misunderstanding, Stephanie. You deliberately tried to prevent someone from booking a room at this hotel because of how she sounded on the phone. Diana stood up and began walking around the conference table, looking each staff member in the eye. Maria, when I asked you for tourist recommendations, you steered me away from Atlanta's premier historic sites and suggested I shop at Walmart. Would you have given those same recommendations to a white guest? Maria was crying now. No, ma'am, I wouldn't have. Kevin, you refused to let me use the business center and claimed there was something wrong with my room key. But there was nothing wrong with my room key, was there? Kevin shook his head, unable to speak. Diana returned to the front of the room, and Michael, you called me into your office and told me I should stay at hotels more suited to my needs. You suggested that I wasn't accustomed to luxury properties and that I should consider other options in the future. What you were really saying was that black guests aren't welcome at the Meridian Grand. Michael finally found his voice. Ms. Williams, I made a terrible mistake. I let assumptions cloud my judgment, and I'm deeply sorry. You're sorry because you got caught, Michael. You're sorry because it turns out the black woman you insulted owns the building you work in. Diana sat back down and opened her folder to the last page of notes. Here's what's going to happen. Effective immediately, Michael Harris is no longer the general manager of this hotel. Jennifer Walsh, Stephanie Rodriguez, and Kevin Park are terminated. Your final paychecks will be mailed to you. The fired employees started to protest, but Diana cut them off. You made conscious decisions to treat guests differently based on race. You created a hostile environment for black visitors to this hotel. And when given the opportunity to recognize and correct your behavior, you doubled down on your prejudices. She turned to the remaining staff members. For those of you who are keeping your jobs, understand that this hotel is going to change dramatically starting today. Diana pulled out a thick document. This is a new anti-discrimination policy that will be implemented immediately. All staff will undergo mandatory bias training within the next 30 days. We will be hiring a diversity and inclusion consultant to review all of our policies and procedures. She paused to let this sink in. We will also be conducting regular undercover assessments to ensure that every guest, regardless of their race, appearance, or perceived economic status, receives excellent service. Carlos Rivera, one of the front desk clerks who had kept his job, raised his hand tentatively. Ms. Williams, what can we do to make sure this never happens again? Diana looked at him with approval. That's exactly the right question, Carlos. You can start by treating every guest as if they might be the owner of the hotel, because you never know who someone really is until you take the time to find out. She stood up again. Maria, I want you to create a comprehensive guide of Atlanta attractions that treats all visitors with respect, regardless of their background. Ashley, you'll be promoted to assistant front desk manager, and you'll be responsible for training all front desk staff on proper guest service protocols. Diana walked to the window overlooking the lobby. This hotel was built to be a place where everyone feels welcome and valued. Over the past few years, it became a place where discrimination was tolerated and even encouraged. She turned back to face the room. That ends today. From now on, the Meridian Grand will be known for providing exceptional service to everyone who walks through our doors. Diana closed her folder. Any questions? Ashley Chen raised her hand. Ms. Williams, how do we rebuild trust with guests who may have experienced discrimination here in the past? We start by acknowledging what happened, taking responsibility for it, and demonstrating through our actions that we've changed. We also reach out to organizations in the Black community and invite them to give us another chance. Diana looked around the room one final time. I built this company because I believe that hospitality should be about making people feel valued and welcome. I forgot to ensure that my own values were being reflected in my hotels. She picked up her folder. That was my failure as a leader, but it was your choice as individuals to treat people with disrespect and discrimination. As Diana prepared to leave, she had one final thought. The staff members who are staying will have the opportunity to be part of building something better. The staff members who are leaving should use this experience to examine their own biases and do better in their next positions. The door closed behind Diana, leaving the remaining staff to contemplate what they had witnessed and what they had learned about their own assumptions and prejudices. Within 6 months, the Meridian Grand had become known as one of the most inclusive luxury hotels in Atlanta. But more importantly, Diana Williams had learned that true leadership meant being willing to confront uncomfortable truths about your own organization, even when those truths were painful to acknowledge. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you see your own world through different eyes. The Meridian Grand Hotel was bustling with activity as Diana Williams walked through the lobby exactly 1 year after her undercover stay. But this time she was there as herself, the owner conducting her regular monthly inspection. The differences were immediately obvious. At the front desk, Carlos Rivera, now the front desk manager, was warmly greeting every guest regardless of their appearance or background. Ashley Chen, who had been promoted to assistant general manager, was personally ensuring that all guests received comprehensive information about the hotel's amenities. The new general manager, Keisha Washington, was a black woman with 15 years of hospitality experience, whom Diana had recruited specifically to lead the hotel's cultural transformation. "Good morning, Ms. Williams," Keisha said, approaching Diana in the lobby. "Ready for your tour?" "I am. How are things going?" "Better than we ever imagined. Our guest satisfaction scores are the highest they've ever been, and we've been recognized by 3 different travel organizations for our commitment to inclusive hospitality." As they walked through the hotel, Keisha pointed out the changes that had been implemented over the past year. "We've retrained our entire staff, revised all of our policies, and created new procedures to ensure consistent service for all guests. But more importantly, we've changed the culture." Diana observed the interactions between staff and guests. She saw black families being warmly welcomed and given the same level of attention as white business travelers. She watched as front desk staff offered upgrades and amenities to all guests, not just those who fit a certain profile. What about the staff who remained after the terminations? They've embraced the changes completely. Many of them have told me that they didn't realize how their unconscious biases were affecting their work. "The training opened their eyes." Diana nodded with satisfaction. "And how are we doing financially?" "Our revenue is up 23% from last year. Turns out that providing excellent service to everyone is good for business." They stopped at the concierge desk, where Maria Santos was helping a young black couple plan their anniversary celebration. "Maria has become one of our most valuable team members," Keisha explained. "She's developed expertise in Atlanta's black history and culture, and she's created partnerships with black-owned businesses throughout the city." Diana watched as Maria enthusiastically described restaurant options, recommended a jazz club in the historic district, and arranged for a private tour of the Martin Luther King Jr. historic site. "The transformation has been remarkable," Diana said. "There's something else I want to show you," Keisha said, leading Diana to a wall display near the business center. The display featured letters and reviews from guests who had stayed at the hotel over the past year. Many were from black families and business travelers who praised the hotel's welcoming atmosphere and exceptional service. One review particularly caught Diana's attention. "After years of experiencing subtle discrimination at luxury hotels, I was amazed by the genuine warmth and respect I received at the Meridian Grand. Every staff member treated me like a valued guest, not like someone who didn't belong. This is what hospitality should be." Diana felt tears forming in her eyes. "This is exactly what I hoped we could achieve." "There's one more thing," Keisha said, handing Diana a folder. "These are job applications from hospitality professionals who specifically want to work here because of our reputation for inclusive service." Diana flipped through applications from experienced hotel workers of all backgrounds who were seeking to join an organization that aligned with their values. "We've become known as a place where both guests and employees are treated with dignity and respect," Keisha explained. "That's attracting top talent." Undi, as they concluded the tour, Diana reflected on everything that had changed since her difficult weekend as Diana Johnson. "Keisha, can I ask you something? Do you think the changes we've made are permanent?" "I think they're embedded in our culture now. But I also think we need to stay vigilant. Bias and discrimination can creep back in if we're not constantly working to prevent it." Diana nodded. "That's why I plan to continue doing undercover visits at all of our properties." "You're going to do this again?" "At least once a year at each hotel. I never again want to be surprised by discrimination at my own properties." As Diana prepared to leave, she stopped at the front desk where Carlos was training a new employee. "Remember," Carlos was saying, "every guest deserves our best service, regardless of how they look, what they're wearing, or what kind of room they booked. We never know someone's story, and it's not our job to make assumptions." Diana smiled, remembering her painful check-in experience with Jennifer a year earlier. "Carlos," she called out. "Yes, Ms. Williams? How's the new training program going?" "It's going great. We're teaching everyone that hospitality means making people feel valued and welcome, not judging them based on appearances." Diana felt a sense of completion that had been missing for the past year. That's exactly right. As she left the Meridian Grand that day, Diana realized that her uncomfortable weekend as Diana Johnson had been one of the most important experiences of her business career. She had learned that success wasn't just about building a profitable company. It was about creating organizations that reflected your values even when you weren't watching. More importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is admit when they've failed to live up to their own standards, and then do the hard work of making things right. The Meridian Grand was now the hotel she had always intended it to be, a place where every guest was treated with dignity, respect, and genuine hospitality. And Diana Williams had become the leader she had always aspired to be, someone who was willing to confront uncomfortable truths and make difficult changes in service of what was right. Sometimes the most important lessons come from seeing your own world through different eyes. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give people is the opportunity to become better than they thought they could be. What did you think of Diana's courageous decision to test her own hotel? Her story shows us that true leadership means being willing to confront uncomfortable truths about our own organizations, even when those discoveries are painful. Diana's journey reminds us that discrimination often happens in subtle ways, and that people in positions of power have a responsibility to ensure their values are reflected in their institutions. This powerful tale demonstrates that real change requires more than good intentions. It requires the courage to see problems clearly and the commitment to do the hard work of transformation. Leave your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications to hear more incredible stories about ordinary people making extraordinary decisions that change lives and organizations forever. Have you ever experienced discrimination in a place of business? Let us know, and check out more inspiring stories right here on the screen.